It's Vancouver's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Angie Barnard coming to you from Canada's podcast, where we listen, discover, and engage. I'm super excited to have Adam Kreek with me today, and wait until you hear his bio. But he is one of North America's top management consultants and executive coaches with degrees and certifications from Stanford University, UBC Sauder School of Business, and Queen Smith School of Business. He's a guest lecturer at the University of British Columbia, or University of Victoria in British Columbia, and teaches strategies and skills of leadership, high performance, and perseverance to corporate and government teams globally through keynotes, workshops, and online seminars. Adam has coached, trained, and taught hundreds of thousands of people, including teams at Microsoft, General Electric, Mercedes-Benz, L'Oreal, Shell, TEDx, and more. He runs two small corporations himself, his own business, KreekSpeak, and, which I'm excited to talk about in a few minutes, Ergo Eco Solutions, which is a low carbon initiative that connects small business with small governments. He is launching a new book called The Responsibility Ethic, and I confess that I read the first chapter last night, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about it, Adam, coming out. I'm super excited. Keep the force, keep the fire, woo! So we'll talk about that a little bit. Keep the fire. He's also, we can't underestimate the impact of him being a two-time Olympian. Adam holds 60 international medals, including Olympic gold for Canada, woo-woo, and multiple Hall of Fame inductions. He did, in 2013, make the first ever attempt to row unsupported across the Atlantic Ocean from Africa to America, which is the subject of an NBC Dateline documentary, Capsized. So welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Angie.
So we're pretty much neighbors. We both live here on Vancouver Island. So I got the my intro to get to know Adam was in person at a fabulous little cafe downtown in Nanaimo last week. And you live in Saanich. Yeah,
Saanich, British Columbia.
Can you share a little bit of your entrepreneurial story with us, Adam?
Well, my entrepreneurial story started as an Olympic athlete. To be an Olympic athlete, you have to find ways to get money from different sources. The money that you get from the government isn't quite enough to survive, so you're constantly looking for grants or other odd jobs to make ends meet. And for me, one of those odd jobs was speaking and training in middle schools. I'd go in with a program called the Esteem Team and teach them SMART goals. And I'd partner with an organization called Clean Air Champions, an organization where I eventually sat on the board, where we encouraged kids to take active transportation to school, and we tracked it and had 2 visits. And on the second visit, the kids who did really great got a gold medal, and the kids who didn't do so great got a bronze medal, and everyone was celebrated for for reducing their carbon footprint, for making the air a little bit cleaner, that sort of thing. So I started out looking for different funding sources to achieve my end goal. Then after the Olympics in 2008, I leaned into 2 different entrepreneurial ventures. One was a biodiesel company. I partnered with a man by the name of Chris Karch, and we collected waste cooking oil and turned it into a biodiesel. An enterprise that eventually flopped and failed. And then I kept getting requests and opportunities to speak at organizations. So I'd go to annual conferences or offsites, and I'd be be your friendly neighborhood Olympian, and tell the story of success and failure and hard work, and certainly the same story that I'm sure most successful entrepreneurs need to know and know all too well. Especially the failure side of things, especially perseverance, endurance, having courage, all these sorts of things. So again, it's a lot of the soft skills, or what I'd call professional skills, I learned as an Olympic level athlete were very transferable to what I needed to be an entrepreneur. So then traveling down my entrepreneurial journey, my biodiesel company flopped. The the speaking business was working, but it takes a while for a business to actually get its legs. My general rule of thumb is about 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the dip is around 2 years in. And for me, it was no different. So 2 years in, I had this crisis of meaning. Am I doing the right thing?
Right.
What should I be doing? A friend called me up, said, hey, do you want to come up to the Yukon? And so I went up to the Yukon. We did some gold exploration. I did that, made some quick money, but then realized, hey, you know what? I should stay on this path of speaking, of training. And at the same point in time, I got hooked into an adventure to row across the Atlantic Ocean. And that actually spawned my entrepreneurial journey even more so, because I was in charge of the business side of things. And in fact, rowing across the ocean, some people might look at it and say, wow, that's amazing. Like, how do you row across the ocean? But for me, having been someone who went to the Olympics and knew how to push their body, the challenge wasn't actually getting from point A to point B. The challenge was, how do I put together $500,000 to go from point A to point B?
Yes.
So building the business case, getting organizations on board and individuals on board who'd be willing to give us the money in exchange for value. At the end of the day, being an entrepreneur is generating value for society. And I might add a layer to that, generating value for society using your own personal values. Every individual has a hierarchy of values, of ways they like to exist, of things they like to do, things they like to give. And so if you can deliver value to society using your personal values, then you will have a satisfying entrepreneurial journey, and it will give you the courage to continue, the courage to endure failure, the courage to endure the inevitable dips that occur on the entrepreneurial journey.
Fantastic.
So we went and we built this program, and eventually partnered with probably 100 different sponsors who just gave us products, sponsors who gave us money, and we made this happen. We made this adventure happen, where we launched from Dakar, Senegal, heading to Miami, Florida. The boat capsized in the Bermuda Triangle after 73 days at sea. That's another story altogether. But the ironic part of this was that afterwards, I was sitting down. I was still in the world of corporate training and speaking. I was sitting with my agent and Perry Goldsmith in his office, and I was sitting there, and I had a 2.5-year-old son, and I just had my daughter, my second child, and I'm thinking, how am I going to make money for these little people and provide for them? And I was shaking my head, like, I didn't make it across the ocean, Perry. Like, what kind of story is this? And he looked at me and he laughed. He said, Adam, you have a horseshoe up your butt. Right? Well, you've already won the Olympic medal. You can show people that you know how to get things done. Now you have a story where you almost died and a story of perseverance. So this is actually something that's really good for your business and what you're doing from a storytelling standpoint. So I doubled down on the speaking training, and eventually, after sitting at round tables with medium-sized to large-size corporations, because those tend to be the organizations that would hire me. So organizations with at least 200 people, up to 100,000 people, or the big organizations that are out there. But I'd be sitting around the table with the CEO, the VPs, the COO, the head of HR, and I'd be having conversations with them. And eventually, I just found that I really enjoyed, it seems kind of funny, I enjoyed these annual meetings where I'd see them put up their strategy, they put up their spreadsheets, they're talking about how they're making business happen. And at the same time, I had reignited my involvement in the world of biodiesel. So I partnered with a man by the name of Brian Roberts, and we ended up creating a not-for-profit, for-profit entity that collects waste cooking oil, turns it into petroleum replacement, low-carbon products, and links with small governments to lower their carbon footprint. And so I was learning from these larger organizations and shifting the knowledge, bringing it back to this smaller organization, acting as a bit of an executive coach and a trainer at the smaller organization, and found that I really enjoyed this role, and it fit me naturally. It fit my talents naturally, my inclination naturally, as well as my value set. I talked about personal values. If you want to deliver value to the world in a way that's sustainable, it has to serve the values that you have and how you want to exist in the world. So that transitioned into me becoming an executive coach, a specialist on self-leadership, these sorts of things. And so I've got a small group. I can't work with too many people one-on-one. But I've got a small group of people that I work with one-on-one, just to help them up their game and help them help them rise up the ranks in their organization, be better leaders, improve their career prospects, and keep them, be kind of like a trusted confidant on their path up to career success, which is, I've seen be incredibly valuable for the individuals I work with. And then I also work with executive teams, so run them through strategic planning sessions and offsites, so a small group, anywhere from 4 to 10 people, and we run through the annual or biannual planning that needs to happen. So right now, the main part of my business, I'd say 50% of it is going off into organizations, to offsites. I deliver a keynote speech, might deliver a workshop. For example, I'm going down to Vegas next week to work with a supply chain. I'm working with their sales force, so presenting a keynote on goal setting and what it means to set goals and to endure and get them. And then we're doing a work-life self-balance piece, where we reflect upon our work, our life, ourself, and we figure out what needs to change and how to boost ourselves incrementally. And the other parts of I'd say 25% of it is coaching with my small group of clients, and the other bit is training and executive retreats. So it's a nice mix for me. No day is the same, and
right, lots of variety.
And then I guess lots of variety, and I still do. And again, I forget all the stuff that I do because I'm just remembering right now. Because I also work with the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. I'm a big supporter of men's health, working age men's health. So just making sure that there's messages going out there for working age men to ensure that they're healthy and they're able to do the work that they need to do. And still, I don't know, I still maintain a lot of volunteer roles with Growing Canada, and I'm involved with another small business in town. They create rowboats and sell them internationally, Whitehall Spirit Rowing, and a rowing machine company, RP3. So I'm involved with a lot of different organizations, things that are
wear lots of different hats.
Wear lots of different hats, but it's typical entrepreneurial stuff. You have the freedom to do the things that you love and add some energy to it. And I feel like that's the real gift of the entrepreneurial journey.
Well, and that's something that you and I talked about in person the other day, is bringing energy to a space or a group of people. One question I have for you is, what is the role of motivation in our society? Why is it so important to inject, have an Adam come in and inject a new level of energy into a group? Why is that so important?
We know what we need to do, we just don't do it.
Why not?
Why don't we do what we know we need to do?
Yeah.
We're not motivated.
Okay, so the role of motivation is really go out and you just calling their shit, right? Just saying,
you call your shit.
You know what you need to do. Why aren't you doing it?
Exactly.
Cool.
And sometimes you just need to hear the obvious.
Yes.
Do it.
Right.
And I struggled with this when I first went out and I had this career, because I was, at the end of the day, I look in the mirror just like everyone else who listens to the podcast looks in the mirror. I'm just a guy. And so, but at the end of the day, you recognize people need to hear positive messages, and they need
Yes.
to hear reinforcements of ideas that push them forward, because there's a lot of interests out there that are competing for your attention, and there are things that are not necessarily productive that will want to suck you in. You know, for example, there's a reason why in Canada, for example, we limit alcohol marketing, tobacco marketing, pornography marketing, like all these things that are addictive. If you want to make a lot of money really quickly, just get into, something that's addictive and sell it and market it, because people will be drawn in and say, oh, I want more of that. And then it feeds a loop. And so the purpose of positive motivation is to remind you that, you know what, even though we're not promoting broccoli, there's no broccoli marketing board. Guess what? You should probably have broccoli once or twice a week. That would be a good thing. And when I was a kid, there was a Hal. This is again great to be with Canadians, but Hal Johnson and Joanne McLeod, participation, those kinds of messages.
Okay, that's dating. That's dating us. Uh-oh.
Well, that's fine, but think of these positive messages that come out, and you look at them and you say, you know what? I'm so glad I saw that message. And although it's not feeding the bottom line of something that is, of an organization that's necessarily profiting from it, it's feeding the bottom line of goodness, of the human power that drives the Canadian economy forward, if you want to say that from a business standpoint. And I think there is a lot of value in that. And then even from a business standpoint, when I come in to work with sales teams or executive teams or engineers or accountants or nurses, at the end of the day, we know how to behave properly intellectually, but we often don't do it. So it's giving people an excuse to do the right thing. Oh yeah, this Adam Kreek guy said this, so yeah, let's do the right thing. So and we'll be better for it.
So I'm agreeing with you in adding some reinforcement to the comments. And I already knew as soon as I was referred by a mutual friend, Hans, that we needed to connect. And one shared value that we have is this responsibility ethic. And I want to bring it out.
It's a good book. I'm going to hold up the book too. It's a good book.
Oh, hey, Matt. Is the reason why is because the reason I think that Hans suggested that we needed to connect is because this is probably one of the core things that I keep talking about, which is something you've just said. We know what we need to do. Maybe there's a fear or shame or blame or guilt or, taking that first step. And there's something I want to bring up in the book that, chapter 1 is taking responsibility for the fear of failure. And then one thing that totally made me giggle at the very end is take one point from the list and circle it, take a picture, write it down. And I want to highlight this one because this is the one that I wrote down. Okay. And it's related to your failed attempt across the ocean. But keep your ocean rowboat cabin door latched on cruise ships in stormy weather.
That's a great learning.
What does that one mean to you? I can tell you what it means to me, but what does it mean for you as the author?
Well, what it means, and it's actually quite a literal learning as the author, and it's kind of my quirky sense of humor too. Yeah. Because I'm assuming
I did laugh out loud.
But I'm assuming that maybe 1 out of 10,000 people who read my book will actually go across the ocean and row, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I remember that Kreek's book. He said to make sure the hatch door is closed during cruise shift changes." And guess what? And I work with a lot of organizations doing safety leadership training, and the most dangerous time in like when you're working in heavy industry is what time? It's shift change, which is, I think, is a very salient point. And so again, what it means to me is that when you're going through a shift change in an environment that's dangerous, you have to be extra on your guard, because you're connecting with other people, you're dialing down because it's the end of the day, the beginning of the day, and you're less aware of your job and the dangers that are around you. So what that means to me is very literally, be safe when you're somewhere dangerous and you're going through a shift change. and make sure that goddamn hatch door is closed. If ours was closed, we wouldn't have capsized in the Bermuda Triangle. But that's for sure.
Well, and I just, part of it for me is it was alliteration for life, right? Which is,
it's a metaphor.
you know, that at that stage, and you talked about working men's health, and you know, and from a mom's point of view too. I mean, any parent's point of view is when we're at this phase of life, right? We're giving so much in the work that we do, and we've got kids that depend on us, and partners that we want to, you know, show up as your best self, and you know, we can be exhausted. It's the end of a shift, right? And sometimes people pivot into different lifestyle paths. Sometimes they just need to hunker down and shift change. And I just saw it as an analogy for life, right? There's points in your life when we take these major leaps, and to actually close and latch the door and do some serious, you know, thinking and be mindful about protecting your environment is
well, I think
critical.
it's so true. Yeah, we got to protect our own environment. And I think I've been reflecting on this recently. Life is kind of cruel, plays a cruel joke on you, because the moment that you have kids is the same moment you get a mortgage, is the same moment your career is taking off. And you're like, what the heck is going on here? Like, shouldn't I be spending time with my kids? Like, shouldn't I be like building a business and making money? And I've, you know, should I be paying my mortgage? And then you go out there and you're competing. And I find I'm a competitive person because I'm an athlete. It's like, oh, I'm competing against these assholes who don't have mortgages, who don't have kids. And like, I get that it's not quite like the Olympics, where, you know, everyone's coming from a very similar place. And that's just conversation fodder.
Well, and that's the first chapter, so I look forward to more. But let's segue a little bit into, tell me about how you ended up here. Did you grow up here on Vancouver Island?
No, I grew up in London, Ontario.
Okay.
Beautiful southwestern Ontario. You know, big deep snow in the winter. You know, hot muggy summers. It was a great place to grow up. Loved it there. Have a lot of good memories. After high school, I moved to Northern Alberta, did some resource work, worked on the rigs, slammed around some steel. Then in high school, I did have a rowing coach who said, you know what, Adam, you could be an Olympian if you wanted to. I think the words he said is, you could be you're an Olympian, you just don't know it yet.
You're right.
And so I thought, well, I should pursue this. And at the same time, and I didn't end up taking the geotech path, but I thought I should get into resource development, resource extraction. You know, 50% of Canada's billionaires, you know, at least made it through resource extraction. So it's a very valuable part of our economy and our industry. So I was thinking of going in that direction, but I said, you know, I need to get this rowing thing out of the way, and moved to Vancouver Island as a rower. And to study geotechnical engineering and earth sciences. Then, you know, met my wife here, and we moved down to California, came back, had kids, and here we are.
Here we are. So tell us a little bit about lifestyle in, and very specifically Saanich. So get out your maps and check out where Saanich, British Columbia is. But why is this environment, why do you love where you live?
I love where I live because I have a young family, and I've constructed my career because, you know, high on my values hierarchy is, is the emotional connection and closeness that I have through family interactions. So what I love is that we're a 5-minute walk from the kids' school. And so I walk the kids to school every morning. I'm here, which I love. It's probably one of the favorite parts of my day. We're right across from a park where we have owls that come, there's deer, there's a creek that runs through it. So we're very close to nature. We're also a 7-minute walk from a recreation center that has a gym and a sauna, and I'm close to the grocery store. So I can walk and bike and live in a 4-block radius. I don't have to leave that ever if I don't want to. And my office is in the basement. So that is, the only thing I'd change would be living right next to the ocean. But then you lose some of the walking benefits and the closeness. So, but I think it's it's a great place to be, and that's why I chose to be here.
And is there any one particular place that is very inspiring for either you to go on your own or with your family that you think, I love this spot?
Well, every Friday morning, I've got a group of old athletes, ex-military special services guys, and a few entrepreneurs come out too, and we run up and down Mount Douglas, and then we do that a couple times, and then we jump into the ocean and we sit in the ocean, do cold water training for about 10 minutes, and we do that every Friday. So I'd say that's definitely a highlight of my week, because
nice.
I get really immersed in nature, and I remember why I live on Vancouver Island. Because again, when you're working and raising family, you're like, this is what we're doing. We're sitting in front of a computer, and
right.
That's it's great to sit in front of a computer. It's nice to not be.
Exactly. So a little bit of, you've written your own book, but can you share with us another kind of must-read book, as an entrepreneur's perspective?
Well, let me open up my book, because at the back, I've got a list of a ton of books. So what will I say?
Okay, what page?
Page 255. So I know I keep coming back from an entrepreneurial perspective to scaling up. I use it a lot in my coaching and consulting practice. It has a lot of Vern Harnish if any of you listeners have not been exposed to Vern Harnish, I don't know what you're gonna call him. He's a giant that you stand on his shoulders. He has so much information that's been compiled, started with the Rockefeller habits and evolved into scaling up. That's a very good thing.
Cool.
And then the other one I would say, and I'm going to go a little bit.
This, by the way.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing.
The other one I'd say is On Writing by Stephen King. So to be a good entrepreneur, you have to be able to communicate, and especially if you want to get your message out there and create content, you have to be a very good writer. I wasn't trained as a writer, but I learned the book I learned the most about writing from was Stephen King's On Writer. One, it's a great story, talks about being addicted to cocaine for a decade and writing tons of books, and it has a very compelling personal story, and then puts in great tips on how to be more concise in your prose. So those are 2 books.
Awesome. I love that list of resources. I might share that, but more importantly, will you just buy the book and get the list of your referrals? But having so many accolades under your belt, is there one particular motivational quote that is sitting on your desk or your computer that is just kind of your go-to? There's probably tons, but.
How about this one?
Okay, let's have a look.
Can you see that?
What you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals. Nice.
Boom. Mr. Thoreau. He's on my wall. Oh, put him back up there.
I love that you have them attached with Velcro.
Yeah.
So awesome. Simple learning. I've got a great idea. And then if you decide it's ditch worthy, you can get rid of it at some point.
I guess so.
I love it.
Wasn't planned. Very serendipitous.
Okay. And are there any, you're in the biodiesel industry, which we could do a whole nother podcast on that, which I would love to do at some point. I'll
put you in touch with Brian, and he's another entrepreneur I think that would be very valuable to the listeners of this podcast. So.
Well, and I think, Vancouver Island specifically, British Columbia specifically, we have definitely a culture of, circular economies, sustainability, being in touch with the environment is super important with us and kind of anywhere in Canada, but very specifically here, I think. So I would love to talk more about that venture. Is there anything particular that you would like to share with us that we haven't already talked about?
If there's anything particular I'd like to share, well, I might just reinforce the book. Right, come out and get the book, because the book. It took me 10 years to write this book, and I think, and again, I talked about my sporting journey as a metaphor for the entrepreneurial journey, and I'd also say that writing a book is also something that's very similar. It took me 10 years to write this. 10 years of writing, early mornings, I'd get up at 5 in the morning and write, and I'd spend winters when my work would slow down. My work slows down in December, January. So I'd put extra time in the winters, in the early mornings, and that's what created this book. And it was just a lot of pushing, a lot of persevering in the darkness when no one was watching, when no one was celebrating, when no one really cared. And now that I'm over the hump and I'm able to promote the book and push it out there, and I'm honestly very proud of everything that's in there. And I think there's actually a ton of value, especially for entrepreneurs who need that grit, need that drive, need some insights. I think this will speak right to your soul. And I'm recording the audiobook this week.
Oh, fun.
Cool. So I think for a lot of people out there listening, the audiobook will be much more accessible because you can plug it in while you're driving, commuting, holding a screaming baby in the middle of the night. I know I've listened to a few audiobooks. Okay, I've got
doing that,
baby.
bouncing.
Might as well educate myself.
Which is so true. And I think one thing that's common there is, we tend to do more than one thing at a time, right? Like we bounce babies while we're we go for a run while we're listening to podcasts. I mean, that's just what we do. Did you suggested at one point the possibility of a chapter?
Yes. Oh, yes. A chapter, free chapter for anyone who wants to email me. The best chapter I think for the entrepreneur in this book is chapter 5, Be a Pro. So if you email me at info at KreekSpeak.com, and just say, I heard you on the canadaspodcast.com podcast, then I'll send you a free chapter if you want that. And
absolutely.
And yeah, I'll send you a free chapter too if you want to make a download link work on your end.
Okay.
To Angie or with canadaspodcast.com, and
perfect.
You can feel free to distribute through your website as well. And
when I think one thing I'd like to add, thank you for the gift and the opportunity. One thing that we're with the Internet of Things in this day and age, it's really nice to have a shared language and a shared vibe amongst a network of people. So I think that is one thing that I would love to achieve by us reading the book is, I think if we can all take personal responsibility for our own success, it will have like this magnified and amplified energy that we can all kind of say, oh yeah, Canada's podcast, listen to, met Adam at events in 2020, which we'll talk about later, but and I've read the book and remember the story of the capsize, and there'll be some shared commonality that we can all relate to. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, and I think, and I just want to share this one thing because I just got this in my inbox this morning. The most satisfying form of freedom is not a life without responsibilities, but a life where you are free to choose your responsibilities. Again, I think that's important to remember that we all need to take responsibility if we want to have a happy, successful, fulfilling life. Mm-hmm. But we can have a happier, more successful, more fulfilling life if we take the responsibility to choose our responsibility. That's freedom. That's excitement. And I think that should appeal to the entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. Adam, it has been an absolute pleasure. It was fun to meet you in person. I look forward to doing it again later. It's nice to be neighbors. And best of luck with your trip down to the States. And thanks, Rob, on behalf of all Canadian entrepreneurs for being a great ambassador for us all. And we look forward to connecting you more on Canada's Entrepreneur and Canada's Podcast.